Hello, this is Dr. Kathleen Rosenblatt, and today I'm going to continue with podcasts with incredible musicians. And they're just not all incredible for any one thing. They've got so many different things to be proud of. And I'm an acupuncturist, and my website is called Brain Body Bliss. But I've also written a book, actually two books, about music that are being edited, called Youth Planet, the 60s in a Music Century. And it's a lot to do with the baby boomers and the counterculturalists of the 60s, and especially those that are still going strong today. And that's why I love to talk to these musicians that have been out there playing music and seeing all the transitions and all the blendings and borrowings of music. And today I have the honor of speaking with Peter Marshell, who is an amazing stand-up bass player. And he's played all kinds of different instruments through the years. So Peter, welcome.
Thank you. And I have the honor of having you interview me. I really appreciate being here.
Well, we have a nice relationship because Peter came to play at a wonderful birthday party of a friend, and I was just blown away to be sitting close to a stand-up bass and have the time to just really take it in. Usually there's a crowd and noise and music and so much going on, but this time it was two incredible musicians playing jazz, and I just was really overwhelmed by the resonance of this big instrument, this big box, a standing bass that's, really a resonant box. And so then Peter has become a patient with acupuncture. He seems to be a happy patient, and we just have so much fun talking about music because Peter happens to be a very funny man and full of stories. So Peter, let's start with how you got into music. Like, how did you choose the stand-up bass, and where were you at that time vis-a-vis the planet and what music was happening, etc.?
Well, how I got into music, which was way before me taking up the stand-up bass, was when I was 4. I was born in Topeka, Kansas, and my parents had music in the house, and I was listening to Tex Ritter and Beethoven and boogie woogie jazz, because my parents had a lot of records and it was on all the time, and I was beating time to it, and to all of it, and it spoke to me, and it's like you don't have to think about it. It just affects you. And great music, whether it's simple or symphonic, Beethoven will speak to the youngest human automatically, and that's really the genius in it. It doesn't discriminate.
Now, you mentioned that you were in a bluegrass band in high school, which is really great. It's sort of like Jerry Garcia started out with bluegrass and loved it.
A lot of people. Well, I had relatives and cousins that played folk music.
Yeah, in Kansas, I suppose there'd be a lot.
Well, yeah, we all moved to California, and everybody came out to California, and they're originally from New York, but a lot of them were musically inclined. Some of them actually played. So when I first played ensemble guitar, simple folk music of the time, with a cousin, it felt really good. I go, I want to do this. I have to do it.
Right.
It was, it transported me from the real world.
Right. Wow, that's great. And a mandolin and a banjo and guitar in those days.
Well, I was going to, when I was going to high school in the Valley, Birmingham High School, I ran into these guys who had lived next door to each other. They were in the 11th grade like I was, and they lived next door to each other for years, for like 8 years, and one of them played the mandolin, and one of them played bluegrass Scruggs style banjo, and they were super good. And I said, well, I was just taking up bass at the time. I said, let's do something with this. And they were opening up shopping centers, little strip malls that still exist today. And in the valley we would go from one to the other because they would all have talent shows. And with these guys, I was just playing bass behind them, but they would tear it up and win that $25 first prize. So.
And by the way, we can share it with our audience out over there. So sometimes you can talk to them too, as well as me.
Oh, he told me to talk in there.
Well, you're talking into there, but I'm saying as far as looking, we've got people watching over there. You know, and how would you know? There's so many different things up there
now
to look
you
at.
tell me.
Yeah. Anyways, hello.
Hi.
So, what was your breakthrough? I mean, you have played with Leonard Cohen and Kenny Rankin and Jackie DeShannon and so many different kinds of performers.
Well, yeah. In high school, my sister my older sister met somebody who she's still married to today, and he was a teacher also. He was a teacher, she was a teacher, but he also played guitar and sang in a casual band. And this band did bar mitzvahs and weddings and banquets, all manner of events. And they would hire. Although he wasn't he was professional to that degree, and he could play guitar and sing standards. But the people he would hire were top level studio musicians. They didn't have a bass player. And so they would let me play with them for a minimal amount of money. And I was just thrilled. I got my training in the real professional music world through playing many, many jobs with these guys.
And then you played with Woody Herman, whom I actually saw myself in the 60s in Buffalo, in New York. So you were playing
before that, then from high school, I went to, I started studying bass in high school too with Tom Pedrini, who was 16 years old and playing bass in the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. He was, a prodigy. And then I went to UC Berkeley to go to college and studied with 3 different symphony players up there. I knew that if I wanted to get somewhere on this instrument, I really had to study classically. I became interested in jazz, but in order to get your jazz playing up to speed, you need to practice classically. This was my method. I got into classical instruction to improve my jazz.
Interesting.
And also if you're going to do this, you've got to know what everybody else knows about music theory. It's just, been a lifelong endeavor of putting together information. I took music classes, but I always made sure I hung around or had as roommates people that knew way more about music than I did. And I would just soak their brains. And I always admired the New York and LA studio musicians, the guys' names that people didn't hear, but they were on everybody's records. That
part of the Wrecking Crew,
like those guys, like those guys, but even the precursors to them. My dad had a friend who was a studio musician, so I that's what I wanted to be. Those guys to me were the real musicians. And they really had to know their stuff, and and the pressure of recording told you really who you were.
Right. Well, I know you've played with a lot of different records and things like that. So how did you actually get taken up by, say, Woody Herman?
Well, it's a progression. I started in folk music, and I was obsessed with at a very early age with the Kingston Trio, and Harry Belafonte, which is music you can play along with. I used to play along to records, guitar, then before the bass, and try to play along with them. That was at a very primitive level.
They were so brilliant.
Huh?
The Kingston Trio were just fabulous.
They were good. And then somebody gave me a Les McCann record and a Thelonious Monk record, and I sort of I still like them, but I moved on, so to speak. I saw this world of incredible harmony, structure, but you had the thing about modern jazz, if you want to categorize it, is it has structure, but it also has improvisation involved and spontaneity, and you have to somehow put all that together with other people on the spot.
That, that's
And
so impressive.
I became intrigued. So when I moved up to Berkeley, I immediately everybody needs a bass player. So whatever level I was, which wasn't that high, these other fellow students of mine formed a band, and they were really well advanced in jazz knowledge, and we formed a jazz band that UC Berkeley sent to the university, up to the Notre Dame Jazz Festival, which is sort of like the Heisman Trophy. If you win that prize, it's sort of like the Heisman Trophy. We won it because these other guys, I was just supporting.
And what year was that?
Ross, 1967. And Herbie Hancock was on the Donald Byrd, Herbie Hancock were on the judge. No,
oh,
they were the judges.
Okay. Oh, sorry about the phone.
No, you compete with Juilliard and the Eastman School of Music and North Texas State. And Berkeley had never sent a band. UC Berkeley had never sent a band. And we pulled it off. We won it. And then I sort of knew I can do this. I can do it. And contemplating the other things in life that one contemplates doing for a living in college, I said, yeah, well, I won't have to sit in rush hour. You don't really think all that much about what kind of long-term security this line of business provides, but
more difficult than ever right now.
So you just want to do something that you can stand doing, and then it's a lot less like work.
Well, I've never heard of the Notre Dame prize.
Notre Dame Jazz Festival, yeah.
My dad and his 4 brothers all went to Notre Dame, but I never heard about that.
Yeah, they have a big band for jazz. Every year they still have it. They have a big band category and a small group category. So that was
so that's 67.
Very big deal, yeah. And then I graduated in 68, and I stayed in the Bay Area. I did not graduate in music. I graduated in anthropology, but I took music courses. But everybody I roomed with and everything were music majors. And actually, I ended up in the orchestra because they needed bass players, not because I was that good, in the University of California orchestra there. And Robert Kraft and Igor Stravinsky came to conduct 3 Stravinsky pieces. Wow. So I can put that on my resume. I played with Igor Stravinsky.
That is amazing. I mean, that really arcs the whole, the whole century.
And I didn't even have to be that qualified.
All right. Well, tell me.
Then, so I stayed in the Bay Area, and there was tons of music going on in the Bay Area, and I started out of college. My first real record I made was with Vince Guaraldi. I was with Vince Guaraldi through one of my teachers hooked me up with that gig, and we did concerts, and I did a Peanuts soundtrack with him. I mean, I don't know if people know who Vince Guaraldi is.
Probably not. Probably not.
And then started playing a lot of jazz around the Bay Area. I played with up there. I played with Oscar Brown Jr., George Duke, and just a lot of just fantastic musicians, which I learned so much from. And one of the drummers up there was. Went with Woody Herman, and he suggested me, and then I ended up going on the road with Woody Herman. And Vince Ladiano, that was the drummer's name.
So how far across the country did you go with Woody Herman? East Coast?
Yeah, we spanned it. It was a as I've referred to it, the
I mean, it's very likely that I saw you play, because when I went to see him play, I don't remember what year it was, but would be around then.
Yeah, we played a lot of East Coast stuff.
68, 69.
Yeah, well, this would definitely be 70, 71.
Okay, it could be any time in there, because
You
it's kind of a blur.
you may have.
Yeah.
But that was a very Spartan road experience. It's like the low end of touring. Nothing was luxurious. You're on a bus like 19 hours a day, traveling all night. The pay wasn't great, but you were having a good time because the musicians were so good. The pianist there was Alan Broadbent, drummer was Joe LaBarbera, and these guys all went on and are still having incredible careers and musical directors, and it was, you did it for the experience of the players in the.
So then, how did
music.
you connect with Kenny Rankin?
Well, I was playing with a jazz guitarist called Gabor Szabo.
Yes, and I had an album of his.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. He had some sort of jazz hits. Jazz hits are a little bit different than regular hits. It's a lot less money and people involved. In Seattle, and at a club, and Kenny Rankin was the opening act just by himself. And James Taylor had just come out, and he was doing well, and he was sort of like an act like that. And I started talking to him, and he said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about adding a acoustic bass." And so I remember he lived in the valley, and I was in the valley part-time, and I went over to his house for a rehearsal to see if we could play together, and we played like a half a tune. He goes, "Okay, that's fine." And he says, "Here's some dates." I started going on the road with him. I said, "Don't you think we should rehearse?" He goes, "No, I don't like to rehearse." So my rehearsal was playing with him.
Great.
On stage. I prefer preparing properly, rehearsing. That's for me the way to go. But I was working for him, so if he didn't want to rehearse, we're going to do it right in front of everybody.
Well, tell me about the 2 years you spent with him and George Carlin.
Well, Kenny and George were handled by the same record company and management company. It was all one. Little David Records was a subsidiary of Atlantic, and Flip Wilson also was on that label. A very small label, but they had a few good acts, and they paired us up in a package that went around touring. We did it for 2 years. Kenny and I would go out and play for 45 minutes. And then George Carlin would come on for his, I don't know, hour and 15 or whatever. And that was the show. And we just took this thing, a lot of universities, a lot of colleges all over the country. And
this was years?
This is early 70s, 72 up to 74. And then
What was it like being on the road with Carlin and Rankin?
Well, it was a party all the time. It never stopped. George would use us as a test audience to test out material all day. At one point, we had to tell him to shut up, and we couldn't take it anymore. We'd be laughing so seriously, he'd be in pain because it was funny. He was a funny guy, and but it was just. It was just like that. It was. What can I say? It was a party, and our job was pretty easy. All we had to do is, make sure we got on the airplane.
Mm-hmm. And then he got his own jet.
Yeah. Then George decides that he was, he was doing well and becoming more successful, and he wanted, for convenience sake, to get his own jet plane. It was about a 9-seater Jet Commander that it was called. And I would be on there, my big bass would be on there, and George and Kenny. And we would just fly around the country and in this thing. And
And this is in the 70s when musicians were prone to indulge in certain substances, and you told
Yeah,
me some.
let's, the 70s was the decade of indulgence in the music business like you've never seen since, I don't think. It was just everything was okay all the time. And on this little airplane, they were smoking some then illegal substances, and it was wafting into the cockpit because you were sitting right behind the pilots. This was a small airplane.
So you said not just cannabis, but opium.
Yes, if you want to put it that way.
I want to spell it
I
out.
used it.
I had to share the story.
Yeah, they
because I
wanted
thought
to
it was
experiment,
amazing.
and I remember the pilot saying, Gentlemen, we got to close these little doors here because the smoke's wafting into the." And I realized it's quite unique. I'm flying in a little tin can, 550 miles an hour, and the pilots are breathing in opium smoke. I'm in good shape.
And you told me that you were sort of the keeper of the substance because
Yeah.
you were the only moderate person.
Yes,
involved.
I was. I was. They would let me be the holder of substances so that there would be some left the next day, and maybe the day after that, because they knew I was doing minimal amounts.
And white powder might get spilt.
Oh, all kinds of things can happen
Oh,
if you. They were. They were indulging. We'll put it that way.
Okay.
You need an adult in the room.
Now, how did you hook up with Leonard Cohen? Was that before Rankin or
Okay,
after? I forget now.
that was before.
Before.
I had gone to Europe in 1968. I'd gotten out of school in '68, and I spent a year in the Bay Area. And then when a colleague of mine got me the bass chair playing with Art Farmer, who those of you who maybe never heard him is a pretty well-known, famous jazz trumpet player, very, very well-known. And he was residing in Vienna. He had a residency at the Austrian radio, the ORF. It's government-sponsored radio, which I think all of it was then. Austria was a socialist country, so a lot of stuff was owned by the government, and they were paying. I joined that group, and they were paying us to do radio shows and travel around and do concerts. I played the Montreux Jazz Festival with Art, and we were playing in a club in Vienna, and a friend of mine who was with Leonard Cohen came through. Was doing a concert in Vienna. He knew I was there, and he brought Bob Johnston, who was the Leonard's producer, and he was also on the tour. He was a pretty famous producer. He's produced Simon Garfunkel, Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde. He was a pretty well-known producer, and so this guy saw me. My friend and him saw me play, although it was not like Leonard's music. It was very different music, and they said, "Yeah, let's bring him on the next tour." And so about a year later, there I was.
Wow.
Went back to Nashville. We rehearsed for about a month. Then we went out for a 2-month tour, which was the British Isles and continental Europe, and ended up in Israel.
Now, you told me an amazing story about what happened when Leonard happened to take some LSD in Israel. Share that story with our audience.
Who I hope isn't have anything to do with law enforcement, but I'm just kidding. It's all fine. Yes, well, we toured British Isles, Germany, France, Scandinavia, and then the last 2 dates were in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So the very last date of a 2-month tour, we'd all been out there for a while. Somebody decides it'd be a good idea if we did this last concert all having taken LSD. And I gotta tell you, playing music on LSD is some separate stuff. It's pretty. There's not any words for it. It can get pretty weird.
Do you play
And when you're
better
trying
or
to-
just differently?
Well, I don't know. I know that for me, the neck of the bass was weaving like a snake, and I'm trying to play it, and that was interesting, but you're in front of a lot of people, and you got to hold it together. Somehow, you got to calm yourself down. But at one point, after about four songs, Leonard is so overcome emotionally because the audience love him. They're singing his songs back to him, and he says that he can't go on. He's got to take a break. He's just too much positive energy, too much love. He was overcome. He was pretty high on LSD, which is like it can affect people differently. It's not a negative thing, but it's you're just like open to all these emotions. You become very emotional. So he takes a break. We go backstage, and then he decides that he just can't go out there anymore. It's just too much for him. And he tells his manager had flown in from New York. Is one of these big time. I'm not going to mention his name. Big time manager. And all these handlers were backstage, and Leonard's saying he can't finish the concert. And a lot of people had waited a long time. It was in Israel, and they've traveled from far off places to see him. And so they started clapping and stamping their feet, doing that. And Leonard goes, he says, I don't know, man, just, you got to give him your money back. I can't. And none of his handlers, none of his people around him could convince him. And, by that time I had been with other bands on the road, and to me it's like, yeah, this is a business, and you gotta handle your business. And so basically I went and I talked to him. I said, Leonard, it's just a few more songs. We got to get out there and finish the show. Otherwise, who knows how angry these people are going to get. We may not get back at it to the hotel in one piece. It's just better make it simple. And all these people, I put it to him in very simple terms. Your contract, we're contracted to do it. Let's fulfill the contract. It's the last.
And these people have come from all over the country.
Yeah, they had come on their camels or whatnot to see him. He's totally worshipped. It was like going through there with Jesus when we got to Israel. And he looks at me right in the eye. I swear, he looks at me and he goes, yeah, you're right. I think all I need is a shave. And these people are now, they're doing this, I said, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that would do it. And I said, one of you guys get a razor. There was a little sink in the back area of the stage and a mirror. I said, somebody go get some razor and some shaving cream now. And somebody came up with it. And there's Leonard in the back in front of a little mirror, a little sink in the corner of the rear of the stage, shaving. He's shaving. I said, good, man, you're looking good. I mean, he was pretty lubed. And he said, yeah, I think I can do this now. I said, good. So we went out and finished the show. And
what a story.
There it is. I mean, you can't.
LSD and shaving cream. What else is there?
That.
What else do you need?
It's like, yeah, I mean, of course. But
that's so funny.
yeah, it's
Wow.
I don't know.
I mean, I just, I worshipped him at the time. I mean, that album, A Bird on the Wire, and this nun singing, and all these images that he would come up with in his music.
Yeah, he was. They made a movie and a record out of that tour. Somebody filmed. The guy that did 200 Motels was Zappa. Tony, I can't remember his last name offhand, but they filmed the tour and it became a movie. And Columbia made a record out of the tour called Leonard Cohen in Europe, I believe.
So yeah, in the close-ups you could see the difference between before and after his shave.
Yeah. Well, I didn't care. We just, I
just joking. Well, that's a great story because
But
I've been
I
to
will say
Israel.
he was one of the finest people I have ever worked for, and finest human beings I've ever played music with. Because I've been exposed to a number of different artists, and he rates uh, right at the top as far as being a decent human being and a good man to work for, and very, very generous. So I want to put that in there.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the bass guitar. The difference between an electric bass and the stand-up bass, and just how much it contributes to music. Because I've sort of taken it for granted in my life, and I feel like now that I'm writing this book, I'm analyzing songs that I've listened to 120 times, and suddenly noticing aspects, and I've been noticing the importance of the bass.
Yeah, I've heard that from people. Of course, that's the first thing I notice. If I go into a market and I hear, I'm going, what's the bass doing, and what's the rhythm section like? It's just automatic. But it's not, because the instrument is not out front. It's not necessarily loud like drums, and it's not piercing like a horn. And it's not a whole bunch of notes like a piano. It is sort of there, but it is an intrinsic part of the foundation of the music.
I mean, for me, it's sort of like the space, the room.
Yeah.
It kind of creates for everything else to kind of.
Well, it's also why I took it up. It intrigued me. It's part rhythm. You have to lock in with the drummer. When you're playing in a band, you and the drummer have to be one instrument. And that doesn't always happen, and it makes me a little, angry. But it doesn't happen. But it has to be one instrument. So you're locked in to conveying the rhythm, but you're also not just a rhythm instrument like the drums are. You're playing melodic lines. So it's half rhythmic, half melodic. It's part the bass and the drums, and the bass drum have to lock in pop music. They have to lock in and it becomes like a heartbeat. I mean, you're human beings. They speak, they do all this, they drive cars, but at the base of it is a heartbeat that has to happen. None of that happens without the proper foundation. You can use a lot of analogies, I guess.
And you likened it to the transmission of the car.
Yeah, it's the bridge. It's a transmission. Like the transmission is the bridge between your engine and the wheels. There has to be something. You have an engine that runs and wheels that turn, but what connects them? So it's a connecting role of rhythm and melody and notes, and you can subtly the shape of how a band sounds. With the bass, it's hard to explain. It's hard to put it into words. But by the way you play, what you play on the bass, how much you play on the bass, where you place the notes can shape the musical direction of a band. Whether it's a folk band or mainly I'm talking more like jazz, where everybody has to be Miles Davis said that kind of music is 80% listening, 20% playing. So you've got to really hear it here, and you've got to be almost psychic to figure out what the other guy's going to do before he does it. And you really, really, really got to listen to what's going on, even a little more so than folk music, which is pretty standard.
And you talked about how the wood of that giant
the difference between
resonates differently than an electric bass.
Yeah, all the string, violin, viola, cello, and bass are just different sizes, but they're all shaped basically the same way, because what you're looking at is a sound box. It takes the sound that you make, that the vibration of the string by bowing it or plucking it, and amplifies it, and did so for 200 years before amplifiers, for electricity. An electric bass, which was invented in the 50s or maybe late 40s,
that Les
Yeah,
Paul?
Les Paul might
Who
have
did
had something to do with it. I don't know, from the very, very, very beginnings, because they wanted a bass sound that projected, because in the big bands and stuff, the other instruments would drown out the acoustic bass because there wasn't any amplification, and everybody else is loud. Horns are loud, so they put that, and they invented. I think it came right after the invention of the electric guitar, which they couldn't hear until they figured out how to make an electric guitar. It has usually they have no self resonance, no ability to make sound, a viable sound by itself, because it doesn't have that sound box attached
Which
to
one? No,
the electric bass.
electric.
It has a solid body which doesn't resonate. So the little magnets under the strings are called pickups, and they take that vibration, which you can barely hear. You can hear a little bit under the string, and through electrification and magnetic electrification and current, it makes a very, very big sound when you run it through a amplifier. It's called an amplifier because it amplifies. It makes bigger the sound, and so you lose the acoustic quality sometimes a lot. Well, it has more electric sound and less natural sound. It's like the different than an acoustic bass. The difference between like a classical guitar acoustic and an electric guitar. I mean, there's a difference between what Segovia did and Jimi Hendrix.
I so love the resonance of an acoustic guitar. There's something about it.
There you go.
You just feel it in your skin.
The human ear seems to it seems to be a pleasant experience, a more organic experience, more natural experience, the acoustic guitar. But everybody likes
I like that too.
rhythm and blues. I mean, rock and roll. It's just a different experience. It's a more organic, natural experience you get whenever you get the natural sound. Certainly, I think there's a place for both.
Absolutely.
There's been geniuses on the electric bass like Jaco Pastorius, Victor Houghton. These guys are geniuses on that instrument, and bring a lot to it.
I remember seeing the video of the big Police album with Sting playing bass.
Yeah, he's a bass player.
Da 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 da.
Yeah,
that song.
Every breath.
Thank you. And the video shows him with his stand-up bass.
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of guys double. I play electric bass. I made sure if I was going to be a bass player, because sometimes you did recordings with that, or it depends on the kind of music. To me, if I'm going to play rock and roll or pop music, real pop music, I like to use the electric bass because that's the sound. I don't like to do it on. But if I'm doing more jazz-oriented music, definitely the acoustic. But not on acoustic bass, they amplify it now, so you can get some of the natural sound, and you can put pickups on it, attach pickups, or a contact microphone with a little miniature microphone you put on the instrument, and you can get a lot bigger sound, so you can hear it better. But it's a little more natural, organic wood sound. So.
And what is the call today for stand-up bass? Very much. I mean, in other words, obviously we're not seeing them as much as we used to. But there are niches where people want real jazz.
Yeah, well, certainly orchestras, classical music, use them. Jazz in jazz, and then in singer-songwriter type music, country music. They use it. I've seen it now in big country acts. Will use it for certain parts of their show. It really depends on the artist. What kind of music they're playing, what the artist's preference is. Jazz still predominantly uses amplified acoustic bass.
You also played with the Pointer Sisters. I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
I did. I was on the road with them
I'm
for.
about to interview Eric McCain, who is the son-in-law of one of the Pointer Sisters. I'm forgetting her name. But tell me about that experience, because that was a wonderful.
Well, they did a
fresh air.
really incredible show. In fact, their show was all kinds of music. You had a country tune, jazz, a couple of jazz tunes, R&B. They made it a point to, their variety. They were very popular and worked hard. They worked many, many days a year, and
that's great.
yeah, I was working with Kenny Rankin at the time. Then I left to do that, and then I came back to Kenny Rankin after that.
Well, I think we've covered so much ground, and it's just wonderful, the way you've had such a transitional career working with, bluegrass and Woody Herman, and then Leonard Cohen, and, Jackie DeShannon. I mean, it's just an amazing, you've covered it all, and here you are still going strong and enjoying it more than ever. And we talked about that earlier, that somehow, the freshness is still there. It's still being reinvented.
Well, that's the wonderful thing about most of my calls now are jazz related, most of them. But when I'll go to the gig, and it's a new. Well, you try to make it a fresh new experience. Forget the venue, whether it's a big one, a little one. I play like I'm playing in Carnegie Hall. That's what it's that kind of experience to me, and it gets really good when you play with really good players. The experience is definitely enhanced with the skill of the other players. You have to interlock seriously with other players in jazz forms of music, and so that doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes we have to give a little more than we get. But
well, Peter, if people wanted to get you to play someplace, how could they reach you? Peter Marshell, are you?
I'm in the union. You can publish my phone number.
Sure, you tell it.
Yeah, that's all.
I don't have it memorized. I have it in my phone.
I have one number, 310-612-5210. That number again, 310-612-5210.
Okay, so 612.
There you go. First 5 callers get this beautiful chaise lounge, absolutely free. No, I'm not. I can't do that.
And a new mattress. Well, Peter, this has been great. I've just enjoyed. I've learned so much from talking to you, and I think this is an important, very educational, but very fun travel through your life. So I think I will close this now. This is Dr. Kathleen Rosenblatt. My book is called Youth Planet, the 60s in the Music Century, because I do cover the century, focusing on the 50s to the 60s to the 70s, and then up to today. And that's why we're here, because we're still doing it today. So that's called Youth Planet, the 60s in the Music Century. And on Facebook, it's youthplanet60sbook.com. So, Peter, thank you so much for sharing.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. And if there's anything wrong with your body, see Dr. Kathleen. She is an amazing healer, extremely knowledgeable, amazing healer. And that's why I'm able to sit up and take nourishment today.
All right, Peter. Thanks so much. All right.